You should know this by now. I'm a hugger. She-Ra, Season 5. I'm really gonna miss this show. And I think it went out pretty dang well. I'm not in a position right now to rank the seasons. That's a tough go. But whatever they end up being at, the gap between each entry, it's really small. These are all really, really good seasons. And this one had a lot to tie up. Not necessarily in terms of main plot. It just had to deal with Horde Prime and to defeat him. Which, spoiler, I guess, it does. That shouldn't count as a spoiler. I mean, for God's sake, the theme song screams out, "We're gonna win in the end." I don't think it's a surprise that they do. When I say that it has a lot of stuff to tie up, it's got a lot of character stuff to tie up. It's got a lot of dynamics and relationships and baggage to address in some fashion and to tie up as many of those as it can. There's a lot of it. I mean, just across the board. Even just, getting Glimmer back from the situation that she was in at the end of the previous season. There's baggage to deal with between her and Adora and Bo. Catra, holy crap, baggage like you wouldn't believe. Scorpia's got baggage. Micah hasn't met his daughter yet. Not as an adult at any rate, so, baggage. Entrapta has baggage with being reintegrated into the rebellion since she was with the Horde for a while. So, yeah, Adora and Bo may have gone and rescued her, but as far as everyone else is concerned, weren't you making bots that were trying to kill us, a week ago? Not that week ago, because it was a while back she got banished. But you get what I'm saying. Lots of things to address. Lots of things that shouldn't be glossed over. And thankfully, none of them were. I am going to start getting into what I would actually consider to be legitimate spoilers at this point. So consider that your warning. It's really good. If you like the show up to this point, I assume you've probably already finished it. People were on my butt about watching this. And there were comments on the nitpick rants I did on Pan's Labyrinth that went out yesterday saying, why isn't this a review of She-Ra? Okay, look, first off, you gotta give me a little bit of time, and I understand everyone else binged it through Friday. You know what I was doing on Friday and doing most of this weekend? Seeing Liz for the first time in 2 months. So forgive me if getting to this took a minor backseat. Much as I love it, there are other things going on in my life. Anyways, let's dig into this. So, let's start with Horde Prime, who I'm not sure I was necessarily nervous about, but I will say that I didn't know how effective a villain he was going to be, given that the villains up to this point have had a lot of direct connection to the other characters. Shadow Weaver obviously had a very direct connection to characters like Adora and like Catra, and even Hordak, the ways in which he impacted other characters, we saw that over time, and we saw what that was doing to them, and then later developing the connection with him and Entrapta, and also what happened between him and Catra. So, there's still a lot of the weight was in these established relationships, or relationships that we watched build over time. So I was quite concerned coming in that even though we knew who Horde Prime was, it wasn't like he was made up out of nowhere. He'd been alluded to before, so we knew his deal, but we had no direct investment in him. So I was concerned that he was not going to be as effective a villain. Now he is. What they do is they make up for the lack of that initial emotional direct relationship hook by just making him super competent in really difficult to defeat ways. Which, that was a good way to go. Now, Hordak had been a competent villain, but his weakness was also very clear, especially as we got to learn more about him, which was his focus on his desire to open a portal and get back to Horde Prime. That did distract him and made him slightly less effective than he might otherwise have been in terms of conquering Etheria. Horde Prime, we basically get him and it's like, okay, there's no evident weakness here at all. Not even like his organization is weak, because it's pretty much all clones of him who he can take over and control directly at any given time. And it may not even be possible to actually kill him. And then later on we find out about the chips and that he can take direct control over things other than his clones. And the scope of what he's capable of doing, that is the kind of threat that you need to be bringing if you are not going to be able to bring a more direct personal connection with the villain. You need to bring basically a sheer wall of opposition that's like, I don't see any cracks there that we're going to be able to exploit. And that's what Horde Prime was. So he worked quite well for that. And I'd say he's effective. It's interesting with him also because I found myself getting a little bit invested in his starting to realize that he had any degree of vulnerability, because he's definitely one of those guys who legitimately thinks, I can't lose. But in a way that, because of the power set and the resources they gave him, in a way that doesn't read as, oh, you're overconfident. More in a, oh, that would be overconfident otherwise, but I think you've actually earned that level of confidence. Crap. So he worked pretty well. I'm not going to say he's like my favorite villain ever, but definitely assuaged my concerns about him not being as effective. All the core cast does great. Now, obviously, the heavy focus this season is on Catra and Adora. And they always get a pretty good focus, but there have also been times where we had more explicit focus on the other characters. And while there's a couple of episodes here and there that highlight other people, such as like the infiltration of the party, which is a lot of fun with Perfuma and Scorpia and Mermista and Seahawk, that's really cool. Also a neat way to bring Double Trouble back into it. So that was cool. And there are little things like that, but for the most part, we are dealing with the core cast here. And we get a decent amount of time with Glimmer and with Bo, but Catra and Adora are really at the heart of this. And that's not really a complaint. Obviously, you know, Scorpia is my favorite character, but it's clear who the leads had to be in this. And especially, like, the focus narrows all the more as various heroes start to get chipped, and effectively that moves them to the other side of the conflict. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about from here on out is going to be largely thematic stuff. Oh, before I forget, about the one thing that I would say, not necessarily as a complaint, but I'm not sure why. And there's the one episode where they have to land the ship and they have to go and get fuel crystals on this mostly destroyed planet. And they run into these other travelers. What is it? Starla, Tall Star, Jewel Star. I think that's it. That's them. The three siblings. I'm not sure what purpose they served, really. I mean, it was interesting in terms of being a deep cut from, you know, the original show and the original characters, but given that they never show up again, I'm not sure what was gained by their inclusion. Although, I will say this, I find this thought amusing, and I don't know if I'm going to make it my headcanon, but it's a thought that percolated around. With those Star siblings, in the original, it's three sisters. Now, it's two sisters and a brother. Part of me wonders if that is a indirect allusion to the brother being a trans man. Maybe, maybe not. I would not put it past this show to do that. That's probably the sort of thing they could not have gotten away with doing explicitly. But, yeah, I just had that thought. Anyways, let's dig it a little bit more into the other character interactions. And actually, let's focus this through the filter of what I already did a video on. Redemption arcs. Because there's a number of characters who get various degrees of redemption here. First up is Entrapta, who doesn't actually need a ton of redemption given the nature of her as a character. There was never any malice from her towards the other princesses when she joined the Horde. She just cared more about her research than about the impact that it had on other people. Which, that's a character failing in a lot of ways, but since there isn't really malice there from her, there isn't a lot of redemption that she requires as a character, but they did do, I think, the wise thing of taking about an episode or so with other characters like Mermista being like, why are we trusting her? Because, yeah, like, valid. And not having characters just immediately be trusted because they're like, oh, I'm on your side now, is something that this show managed to do pretty much across the board. And I'm very glad for that, because that was the biggest part of my concern, talking redemption with these various characters. Anyways, hang on to the big one. We'll get there. Hold it. There is Hordak, which, if I were going to sort of rate these, I would call the most questionable redemption, because he did the most grand scale damage of any of the redeemed characters. Like, some of the other ones that Entrapta, or the ones I am going to talk about, like Shadow Weaver and Catra, they did a lot of damage, but a lot of it was focused onto specific people, especially with somebody like Catra. She did a lot of direct personal damage. Hordak did a big scale damage. So the idea of offering him any kind of redemption at all gets a little bit iffy, because yes, the damage that he caused wasn't as personally directed as someone like, say, Catra. So for an audience perspective, maybe it's easier to forgive him, but should it be? Given what he did and how long he did it, I think if the show was going to offer him any kind of redemption, they did it the best way that they could, which was to show that his breaking loose from Horde Prime was a very long, gradual thing. We get hints at it about midway through, but it takes the entire rest of the show before that happens. His actually standing up to Prime is legitimately a pretty kick-ass moment. And then it helps that they're primarily offering him redemption through the lens and the eyes of Entrapta, who is a character who I think, given her nature and the way she views things like morality, I legitimately buy that she'd be forgiving. The show kind of gives a token acknowledgement to maybe we shouldn't be okay with this because Mermista has a tossed off line of, we're just gonna let this happen. But it is kind of played as a joke. So it doesn't personally bother me, but what I could say is I could see where people would be made uncomfortable with Hordak getting redemption, given that he basically received a personal scale redemption when his crimes are global. There's a little bit of a disconnect there. Shadow Weaver got the redemption through death, which normally I take issue with. In this case, I think if you're going to try and redeem Shadow Weaver at all, it has to be through self-sacrifice, and she has to die. Not necessarily in a she is so bad that there's no other way to redeem her way. Not precisely anyways. With her the damage that she causes is so fundamental to who she is as a person, her entire approach to the world. I could never have bought that if she turned fully good and had a selfless moment, that she would ever be able to retain that and not slip back into what she was. I would never be able to trust that. So having her have that moment, which I could believe she could have once in the moment, and have her die during it, I think for her specifically, that was the only way you were going to be able to redeem her at all. And taking off the mask, giving us a full look at the face, and having her actually smile. That was a nice touch. I'm still not a huge fan of redemption through death, because if you're trying to legitimately redeem a character, death is kind of the easy way out. It lets them just be good for a moment. They don't have to keep trying to get better, which is what real redemption and self-improvement is about, is not making the right choice once. It's making the right choice time after time after time after a long time, possibly even a lifetime, of making the wrong choice and having that be your ingrained thought mentality. So with a character like Shadow Weaver, for as much direct personal damage as she did, yeah, I think she kind of had to die, especially given how late her redemption came, which brings us to Catra. Now, I did a whole video talking about my concerns about Catra. Here's the thing that they managed to do, because they didn't do what I said I thought would be the best idea. They didn't, not even the specifics, even the template of what I thought would be the best idea. They didn't do it. Because I said her basically being back with Adora and everybody else was not going to work. Well, they kind of made it work. Because they did the one thing it didn't occur to me that they might do. Because I made the assumption that if there was going to be an attempt to redeem Catra, that it would come at the very end of the show. A bit like what they actually did with Shadow Weaver. And is part of the reason that Shadow Weaver had to die, because we're not going to get time with her after this to confirm that she is in fact getting better. Catra switches sides on episode, 5 out of 13. So what that means is they actually have the time to show her working at it, which it never occurred to me that they would do that they would bring her back with Adora and be with the rebellion any sooner than towards the very end of the thing. And the fact that they did that was brilliant. That was the perfect decision, because it meant that they could do exactly what I would need but assumed there wouldn't be time for, but they made time, which is to show that Catra has to come to terms with what she has done, not only to Adora, but to the rebels, to Scorpia, to feel the pain of having caused that damage, to apologize specifically and directly to the people that she has hurt, and to come to juncture points where she can make similar mistakes to what she has made before again, but she doesn't. And they do all those things, because that's what you need to do to have a redeemed villain actually work, is you have to show that redemption is not oh, I'm on your side now, oh, okay, all is forgiven. It's not as simple as that. People are not going to trust you right off. You need to want to improve, and you are going to have to make hard choices and either catch yourself or have your friends help you when you have the possibility of making your wrong choices again. In the case of Catra, doing things like running away because she doesn't think that there's anything for her here. And it's not a running away because I'm afraid I'll hurt you. It's running away to save her own sense of self. And that has been at the heart of a lot of her mistakes. She shoved Adora away because her sense of self felt more comfortable in the idea that Adora abandoned her, rather than Adora made a decision that was hard for her, and that she wants Catra to go with her. It's easier for Catra to make it a hard line like, no, you abandoned me. And to then just lean on that so hard, which is what she did for the 4 seasons prior. So to break her out of that mindset and have her come close to slipping, to doing something that would have not helped anybody except her, which was what her running away would have been, to have her be at that juncture and be pulled back from that decision with the acknowledgement at every step, this is hard. Yes! They managed it. They pulled it off. Is it the most in-depth and complete recognition of all the things that maybe she needs to go through to really get there? I don't know, but for a 13 episode, 24 minute episode, minutes per episode stint on a show aimed at kids, this is good. It made all the right decisions for how to tackle redeeming characters like this. And also, all the cuteness, like finding out that Kyle has a crush on Rogelio. And seeing towards the end, it looks like they're kind of together now. And Catra and Adora got to kiss. And that was really nice. And I know some people might complain about that, and like, because I know that was an issue with, I haven't seen it, but I know it was an issue with something like Legend of Korra, that there wasn't an acknowledgement of that connection between two characters until the very end. And that was like a mandate from the network. They wouldn't allow that to be confirmed until the very last episode. I don't know if it was a mandate in this case or not, but it feels justified because the two are on opposite sides of a conflict. It's not like they have a ton of opportunities to kiss prior to the point that they do. It felt earned. It worked. Pretty much everything about this worked. Complaints are tiny. The Star siblings, not even bad. I'm just like, not sure why. The redemption of Hordak, like I said, at the end of the day, like, I'm okay with it, but I can see where there's like a little bit of a, not entirely sure, but by and large, the choices made, the performances, the animation's great. They nailed this. And it was nice because final seasons are hard. Even if you've got a plan, final seasons are hard to pull off and nail. And they nailed it with this. This is going to go up there as one of my favorite now completed pieces of television. It'll go up there with The Max and Gallivant. Yeah. Man, and The Good Place. Just a really good from start to finish piece of television. And I'm so glad I got to be here for the ride. She-Ra, Season 5. What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something on down in the comments. And let's talk about it. Usual stuff, like, subscribe. I have a Patreon. That is greatly appreciated. And, you know, links to other stuff, social media, etc. But you also don't have to. End of the day, you're the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.